So something else I want to do is add some thickness or some plumpness, I guess, to these pillows. You can see they kind of got some fatness in the middle, then they kind of gradient out. So we can achieve that using something called soft selection. So I'm going back down to our original edit poly. Something that you could do here is actually right click and rename this edit poly. And if I just put chamfer in here, we're going to know that that edit poly is feeding that chamfer. So we know which is which. And if we select poly, you'll see that there is a soft selection in our edit poly. If we turn that on and select a face, you're going to see a gradient, and this gradient basically dictates the fall off of this move. So if we turned off soft selection and pulled that up, it's only going to move that poly, whereas with soft selection on, it's going to move based on this fall off, which is dictated by the fall off here. So let's just put it on 20 centimeters, and what we want to do is select some of these inner faces. So I've used select rather than move. You'll find if you try and click and drag with move, it's going to move our poly. So we need to actually select first and then move. So that's how we're going to do it. But if we go into wireframe, you'll realize we've actually selected these bottom faces, which we don't want to do. So in our selection, make sure we have ignore back facing on. So now it will only, selections, it will only select outward facing polys. So just make sure you've got ignore back facing on. It's quite an easy mistake to make. So I'm going to go to the top view and select some of these inner polygons. Select these and just pull them up. I think we'll select these guys as well. And we can also use this shrink modifier and then pull those up, and we can see we've added a little bit of I guess plumpness, but I'm not sure if that is the right word to be using. But yeah, it's added a bit of softness. If anything, I think that might be a little bit too much there. So let's just jump back down with that selection. So we could hit grow, and this is just going to pull it back a little bit. Yeah, I think that's looking all right. Let's do the same on this one. Let's add an edit poly above this symmetry because that one's feeding the chamfer. We've got selection on. Make sure ignore back facing is selected. Otherwise, we're going to select them bottom edges. And I'm just going to click and drag these guys. Soft selection on. And just give it a little bit there, and we'll jump down to the the edit poly above the FFD. I'm just going to change this to chamfer, and in the top view, I'm going to use selection, ignore back faces. And let's select these guys. Use soft selection, pull that up, shrink it. I actually think we could do with using these edges along here as well. So I'm going to unhide everything. Let's add some noise to these objects. Now we don't need to put a subdivide on because we've got a lot of polygons from our Turbo Smooth. So I'm just going to grab the noise off of our bottom base and paste it on here, not as an instance because I want to dictate this ourselves, but I actually think that is going to work fine. I'll copy this noise and paste an instance of that onto our other pillow so we can dictate from just the one. And I guess the final touch we want to have on here is the seams that go around the tops and the bottoms, and that's really easy to make. We're going to add an edit poly on top of this pillow, and we're going to select this top edge by double clicking, and we'll also select this bottom edge, and we're going to use this create shape. And what that does is create a shape from our selection. So if I just isolate that now, under rendering, you want to make sure enable in renderer and enable in viewport is on, and you can change the thickness here. So I think 0.1 is going to work well here. It's just a very subtle seam. And I'm going to change that to grey and do the same on the other cushions. We can always go in and add a bit more thickness later on, so we could put it on 0.2 if we wanted. So let's add an edit poly on top and select this one and this one, create shape, and it's just going to follow the last shape created, so we don't actually need to change anything. And because we've done this on top of the noise and the Turbo Smooth and the chamfer, it's actually going to follow the curve. So it's good to do this last, because if we do go back and change the noise, for example, our line is still going to be dictated by that, so we'd have to create this seam again. All right, great. That's looking pretty good. Perhaps I want to close this gap up a little bit here and here, but other than that, I think everything is looking pretty good. Now, if I did want to edit, say, this and make some changes, it might be best to select this and the seam and now create a group, and let's call this pillow 1, for example. And we could add an FFD to it. Pressing 1 on the keyboard. If I now pull that, the seam's going to come along with it. If we'd done that just on the edit poly, our seam would not be in the same place. So let's do the same here. But yeah, that's looking good. Now let's add these big cushions on. I'm also going to change this color to grey finally.